Welcome to another episode of China Update, where I provide you guys with the most up-to-date political, economic and geostrategic analysis on the world's number 2 economy. My name is Tony. Let's jump in. Okay, happy Monday everybody. Welcome to China Update. My flight has been delayed, and so this is coming to you live from Auckland International Airport. My apologies, there'll be a little bit of background noise and the occasional disruption. I'll try my best to edit most of this out. Now, I could have waited and produced a video tomorrow on Tuesday, but I do try and produce videos every day, including Mondays, and there are several important developments that we do need to cover that occurred over the weekend. So please, again, forgive the suboptimal audio quality. Okay, let's begin. And let's start with the US-China relationship. And of course, the big news is the alleged Chinese surveillance balloon spotted and shot down over the United States. We have already spent the last 2 videos discussing this story, so for today, let's just move through a few salient updates. Of course, we know that Washington shot down the PRC balloon, which had been flying over a sensitive military installation in Montana, where the US bases nuclear intercontinental ballistic missiles. This was over the weekend. The White House has told US media that President Biden had ordered the Pentagon earlier last week to take out the balloon as soon as possible, quote, without doing damage to anyone on the ground, end quote. The Pentagon said that 2 destroyers were engaged in a retrieval operation off the coast of South Carolina. This isn't the first time a Chinese balloon has been tracked over the United States. The US military has been aware of them going back to the Trump administration, according to current officials. However, at least one former senior Trump administration national security official said that he and other top officials were unaware of any such incident. At any rate, this time, the incident gained traction in US media and blew up into a serious political issue domestically. As such, the White House made the decision to postpone Secretary of State Blinken's trip to Beijing, saying China had violated US sovereign airspace. A likely embarrassed Beijing initially claimed that the balloon was purely for civilian use and expressed regret that it had, quote, blown off course, end quote. US officials have maintained that they reject this explanation. A senior US administration official told media on Saturday that the balloon, along with another observed over South America, had surveillance equipment not usually associated with civilian research. Beijing moved from defense to offense after the balloon was shot down. In a statement on yesterday, the PRC Foreign Ministry in a statement expressed that, quote, the US use of force is a clear overreaction and a serious violation of international practice, end quote. Soon after this, the Chinese Defense Ministry said it would reserve, quote, the right to use necessary means to deal with similar situations, end quote. Of course, this balloon saga does nothing to help already terrible US-China relations. Now, even attempts to normalize basic communications or establish guardrails is very difficult. The other important development in US-China affairs is the US Secretary of Defense's visit to the Philippines and the signing of a deal to increase the number of military bases there. The deal will increase the number of military bases the US can access from 5 to 9. The US can now rotate its troops for long-term stays and stockpile more military equipment. 3 Philippine bases being considered are near Taiwan. At the signing ceremony, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin expressed that the new agreement, quote, extends to Philippine armed forces, public vessels or aircraft anywhere in the South China Sea, end quote. The deal was in part possible due to the election of President Ferdinand Marcos, elected last June, who has prioritized reviving the Philippines' relationship with Washington, in contrast to his predecessor, Duterte's policy of closer ties with Beijing. US-based The New York Times writes that, quote, under Mr. Marcos, officials in the Philippines have started building contingency plans for a possible Chinese invasion of Taiwan, end quote. Indeed, commentators agree that the deal has been made with Taiwan and the South China Sea in mind. Chinese commentators understand this too. In response to the new deal, a PRC Foreign Ministry spokesperson expressed, quote, the US side, out of selfish interests, holds on to the zero-sum mentality and keeps strengthening military deployment in the Asia-Pacific. This would escalate tensions and endanger peace and stability in the region, end quote. State media outlet The Global Times quoted a Chinese military expert who expressed, quote, from locations in the Philippines such as Luzon and Palawan Islands, the US military could cover the Baisha Channel to the south and the island of Taiwan and the Nansha Islands in the South China Sea.
so it is likely the US will deploy surveillance, reconnaissance, and combat forces in the newly announced bases, end quote. Adding, quote, if a conflict breaks out, all US bases involved in attacking China will be targeted by the PLA, and the countries that host those US bases will get hit, end quote. Hey guys, if you joined this very different episode of China Update coming out of Auckland International Airport, don't forget to hit that like button. And for anyone who can go that extra mile and help me keep China Update sustainable, allow me to produce these episodes through thick and thin, including in airports in this case. Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee links are in the description below. As always, thank you so much everybody for the ongoing support. Let's move on, and we'll move on to the Chinese housing crisis, the big ongoing story for the Chinese economy. Chinese financial media outlet Caixin writes, citing sources, that China may lift the annual cap on centralized land use auctions, quote, in a bid to boost local government coffers that have dwindled after Beijing sought to cool the overheated property market. End quote. The government already began easing land supply rules last year. The sources told the outlet that in a notice about land use parcel sales sent to local governments in December, the Ministry of National Resources did not mention the maximum limit on the number of auctions that a city can hold each year, which in 2021 was set at 3 for 22 major cities, including Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen. A sign, the outlet argues, that the limitation could be eased and that local authorities will be allowed to decide how many parcels to sell in each auction. Caixin tells its readers what we have known for some time now. Quote, policy reversal comes as property developers have been reluctant to bid for land since last year amid an industry-wide debt and confidence crisis. This has squeezed local government coffers as land sales are a major revenue source. End quote. We remember in 2022, government revenue from selling land use parcels declined 27.7%. There is some debate surrounding whether this proposed move will do much to fix the property crisis, with most analysts arguing that at best some localities may see a little more revenue from land use right sales. But ultimately, the crisis, though triggered by a supply-side crisis, i.e. developers being forced to deleverage, is now being prolonged by a demand-side crisis. That is to say, household confidence in property has been hit hard. Shell-shocked developers, assuming that they can secure the capital, will be hesitant to buy land use rights if they fear there will be weak demand for the apartments they plan to build on them. Quote, demand for houses remains weak, so real estate firms are still struggling to raise cash by selling properties. This year, my company made almost the most conservative investment plan ever. End quote. Meanwhile, a sensitive Beijing has objected to an International Monetary Fund (IMF) report published late last week, which described China's real estate market as in a, quote, unresolved crisis, end quote. On Friday, in an annual review of China's economy, the Washington-based institution said China's property crisis continues to drag on growth and, quote, the need for large-scale restructuring remains, end quote, adding that while China will see moderate growth this year off a lower 2022 base, the PRC economy is, quote, still operating well below potential, end quote. In response to this report, Zhang Zhengxin, a PRC representative on the IMF's executive board, in a statement widely carried on domestic Chinese media, expressed, quote, China's property market has been operating smoothly in general and is not in a crisis situation. It is inappropriate to overstate the difficulties in the market, end quote. For anyone who has been watching China Update for some time now, the statement, the property market has been operating smoothly, may come across as a mischaracterization, to put it mildly. Okay, that is today's episode of China Update. My apologies once again for having to record in this sort of environment. I hope the audio wasn't too bad for you guys on your end. We should be back to normal episodes from tomorrow. Wherever you are, have a wonderful day. Thank you for watching, and I will see you then.